Hello, and thank you for tuning in to Starting Small, a podcast about brand development, entrepreneurship, and innovation in the modern world. In this episode, I'm joined by Dalton Misner. Listen as he shares his passion towards videography and his advice as making it as a full-time creative. I apologize as there is a couple technical difficulties with Wi-Fi. Other than that, please enjoy. Hello, and thank you for joining Starting Small. Today I'm joined by Dalton Misner. Dalton is a videographer and photographer based out of LA. I met Dalton back in Indiana in 2018. We were kind of mixing and collaborating on some projects together, and a couple years later, Dalton moved to LA, and now he's working with some of the biggest names in Hollywood. Dalton, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. I'm super excited to be on here.
For sure. Can you just kind of describe exactly what you do, some of the roles you play, and just a brief description of exactly what the videography is?
Absolutely. So right now, currently, like you said, I'm living in LA, and I work for myself. I don't really work at any agencies or anything like that. So a lot of the projects I do are just me, start to finish. And so I guess kind of to give you an idea of what I do, it was before we entered the pandemic and big gatherings were not allowed. I was doing a lot of music work. So a lot of shooting at some venues here in LA on weekends, and then creating recaps. Been doing some music videos lately. And yeah, a lot of it is just kind of those independent pieces that aren't necessarily, don't take a team and they're not super big, but a lot of commercial work. And like I said, a lot of music work. So that's been pretty much it. And then since the pandemic, I've been doing a lot of editing, way less shooting, and shifting my focus towards more brand work and more kind of that commercial style.
Awesome. Okay, so let's go back to before you started videography. You grew up in a small town in Indiana. What was that town, and kind of what was your childhood like without any commercial work?
Yeah. So growing up, it was like you said, I grew up in a town of about 1,000 people, and for context, I graduated with about 82 or 83 people. So a pretty small school, but it wasn't private. That was our public school in the area. So,
Wow.
yeah, basically my whole life up until I graduated high school, soccer was my focus. And, I started playing since I was like, and more joined the travel team, started I didn't even play. I think it was like 8th grade or 7th grade. I didn't even play at my school because I was just traveling and on another team, trying to get better, trying to like have tougher competition and just push myself. And so yeah, basically like I said, from about 10 to 18, all I did was play soccer year round, probably 4 to 5 practices a week, traveling. We're in a small town, so we had to travel about an hour one way to
Wow.
practice every night after school. And yeah, it was definitely a lot. And I mean, that's like, I think I'll thank my parents forever for the sacrifices they made to just taking me to those games, drive, weekends. A lot of my typical week from middle school to high school was doing going to school in the morning. And then right after school, my mom or dad would take me to practice an hour away, practice for an hour or 2 hours. And then we would drive back, and then I would have homework or whatever I have to do, eat food and then go to bed. And then on weekends, on Friday, usually right after school, sometimes I would leave school early. We would pack up the car, and usually, honestly, a lot of times my whole family went, but we would take trips because my games were in the Midwest, but often like in St. Louis or in Chicago or something like
Yeah.
that, where we'd be staying there the whole weekend. So, yeah, that was my life basically from middle school to high school, was those weekend trips and playing soccer. And then, yeah, but besides like sports and my personal life, a lot of it was, I didn't ever touch a camera. Well, that's actually not true. No one around me was, but my dad actually was a wedding photographer for a little bit, and he had a
Okay.
camera around. So that's kind of when I like was introduced to that world that even existed. But I didn't have any interest in it when I was younger. And I was always very artistic, though. I played guitar and drums for quite a few years. I took lessons. I was always taking like art classes when I had the chance in school. yeah, so that was like, I knew that I was artistic and creative, but I was, both my parents are math majors, so I always just kind of was like, I'm absolutely going to college. I was pretty smart in schools, like as far as books and stuff go. It came natural. So I was like, I'm going to go to college. I liked marketing because it was kind of creative, but still, I guess required a lot of, paperwork or a lot of, numbers and things like that. So I was like, that seems like a good hybrid of, using, I guess using numbers and stuff, and then also some creativity. But yeah, as you know, and I'm sure we'll get into later, that ended up not going that route. But yeah, I think that sums it up. It was, a pretty normal childhood. I had, middle class family, and I was definitely had amazing parents. And so I think that, kind of in a nutshell gives you an idea of what it was like.
For sure. And then Dalton went on to study at the University of St. Francis, and this was on scholarship from soccer. And there was also a injury that occurred in the development from high school to college. If you could please describe just a little bit about the injury and kind of how this transformed your outlook on opening your eyes to videography from here.
Yeah. So my senior year of high school, I was, playing college soccer was that was the end for me. That was the dream. Like that's all I wanted. So, and, like I said, I grew up in a middle class family, but I have 3 younger brothers. So, my parents paying for all my school, especially at a private university, was just not on the table. And so I was like, all right, I got to get as much money as I can and, to play the sport I love. So I'm getting recruited lightly. Nothing was, not many crazy deals or anything like that were coming to me, but I actually flew down with my mom to Florida to a D2 school called Florida Southern, and we were there, and it was a recruiting camp. And I had been talking to the school, and there was definitely some interest from both ends, but I had to go play in front of them. So I go down, and I get to this camp early in the morning, and everything's fine. It was going great. I was feeling good, and yeah, so we kind of started like warming up and all this, and my mom had left me there for the day, and we start warming up, and we're just kind of getting, in the groove, and maybe like 30 minutes goes by. I'm feeling great. Everything's going fine. And we're still warming up, just doing some drills. And I had shot a ball at the goal, and I was literally just walking away out of the drill to the back of the line, and I stepped wrong. I stepped wrong, and my ankle rolled, and just I felt and heard this huge pop, and I fell, obviously, and yeah, basically immediately I knew I was done. I was like, I'd never, I was pretty used to having little nicks and little injuries I could get through, and I was like, immediately knew, like, you can just feel the adrenaline rush through your body. I was like, this is not that. So long story short, I tore a few ligaments in my ankle, and I had to go to the hospital, obviously, in Florida, all that fun stuff. We flew home, and that was kind of the end of it like that. I was really depressed for a second because I was like, man, I'm right. Like, this is right after high school soccer and right before the fall semester of college. And I still didn't have a school pick. So I was really stressed, and I was injured. And so long story short, I had been talking to a school that was about an hour away in Fort Wayne from where I live, and that happened to be St. Francis. And I had already luckily went and played in front of the coach a few times. So yeah, basically they gave me an offer, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna have to take it because I can't go play in front of anyone else right now. So it was actually funny. The coach had and I actually don't know if he even knows this yet, but the coach came to my house when we kind of were when I was signing for the scholarship, and he came down to our house and had dinner with us. And I was actually very injured at that point. That was like shortly after Florida. So I had to kind of ditch the crutches and like I didn't walk. I just tried to like not move as much as I could because I didn't want there to be any concern or,
Yeah.
I didn't want that to be a red flag. So, yeah, but anyway, so that basically that's how that went. And that's why I chose that, not why I chose the school. That was definitely a playing factor in me choosing the school.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, then that was basically, I signed the deal. And the next semester I went and played at St. Francis.
And that was the fall semester of 2017, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and then this semester, at the end of the semester, you decided not to continue with college. And if you could just explain what was going on through your mind and what made you lead to that decision around
Yeah,
quitting the college.
absolutely. I think to get there, I kind of have to start with like going to college in the beginning, because going into college, I was still fully planning on going through 4 years of school. And so another key thing I left out, I guess, when I was telling the story of the injury is in the middle of all this, I basically had about 3 to 4 months of not bed rest, but I was like, my ankle was the size of a golf, or not golf, actually like a softball for like at least a
Wow.
month. And it just, the swelling was so insane. And it would go away for a few days, but it just kept coming back. And so, anyway, I just couldn't, I could barely walk on crutches. I was out. So in this time, I was spending a lot of time on YouTube, just consuming content, hanging out. And this is when I discovered kind of the world I'm in now, which is the independent, like, filmmaker, I guess, lifestyle. And I was really intrigued. So in this time, I got super inspired, and I was this oblivious young kid who didn't know anything about that world. All I saw was that it was cool, and I wanted to do it. So I picked up my dad's old camera that he had since I was in middle school, and started taking pictures when I was injured and I couldn't do anything. I couldn't be out with my friends or anything, so I was just taking pictures. And it was the middle of winter, so I just kind of was going outside and doing that, and they were terrible. I didn't know what I was doing, but it lit a fire inside of me, and I was like, wow, I really enjoy this. So that's kind of when, that's exactly actually when this I discovered this passion I have for creating content. And so anyway, so with that, in mind, I went to college, and before my first semester of college, I was actually got a job locally around where I'm from at the only creative agency within an hour of me. So basically they had done videos for my high school, and I had a
Mm-hmm.
teacher, my marketing teacher was able to connect me with them, and I interviewed, and I got a job for the summer there. So that's basically the end of my high school career. And then the summer before college is whenever this whole world of creating content and videos was kind of created for me. So yeah, anyway, I worked there, and that's where I learned how to like use my first video editing software. That's where I learned the first about anything really pertaining to, like I said, creating content, creating videos. And so worked there, went to school. I was majoring in graphic design, played soccer. And then, yeah, I just slowly over the semester started to question myself. And I asked, what is your end goal? How is college going to help you get there? And I had a scholarship, but I was still paying about 50% of tuition and room and board every year.
Mm.
So at a private university, that was a pretty hefty price. And
Yeah.
yeah, so basically I just started asking myself all these questions. I'm a big fan of Gary Vee, so I was consuming a lot of Gary Vee content, and he discusses the topic of college a lot. And so I just started asking myself, is this price I'm paying worth what I'm getting? And basically by the end of my first semester, I had luckily gotten to play a full season, experienced college soccer, which was amazing, and I loved it, and I'm very thankful I did that. But yeah, at the end of it, I was like, you know what? I don't think that what I'm paying and that price tag of $80,000 or $100,000 when I'm done with college is going to be worth my degree in graphic design. So
Yeah.
so yeah, I basically decided to kind of pull the plug on college. And the only reason I did that was because I had that previous marketing job, or I guess creative agency job that I had worked before college. I had that to fall back on. So
Yeah.
that was a very key, I guess, factor in me dropping out and having like a plan, and somewhere to work and somewhere to grow.
Okay, so after dropping out of college your first semester, you fell back to the corporate company that you were working with previously. I had a question on why they kind of took you on. It sounds like they kind of had to train you with the different experience you learned from them, and that's very hard to see typically. So I was just kind of wondering how they took you on and why exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. You're exactly right. I had zero experience, and a lot of it was recommendation from my marketing teacher in high school. I credit her pretty much like the start of me finding a passion for this, and she just helped curate that my senior year of high school. So she put in a good word for me, and I think, I didn't get paid very much, which was completely fine with me because I didn't deserve it at the time. And that was basically the deal. I came on as just an extra hand. They didn't really
Mm-hmm.
need me, but they were like, they saw potential in me. They, I think they saw passion, potential, and I was just very honest and said, this is what I want to do, and I would love to work with you guys in any way I can. So they, like I said, I was put on a pretty low salary, which is completely fine, and that's the relationship we had. Was I was there to help and learn, and I was very rarely given like a lot of responsibility. This was very much like I assisted them when I could, but they never handed me too much responsibility. And then slowly over the summer, I got sent out to do a lot of, well, actually, so thankfully I had a drone. I had a lot of drone experience before this. I had kind of helped out at this other small company doing some drone stuff. So flying drones was one of my strong suits. And they sent me out on a lot of drone, I guess, jobs. So I was able to help that way. And I think that's why. I think they just saw potential and wanted to help and saw potential for me to grow within their company. And I'm very, like I said, very grateful for that because I learned. It's so funny looking back. Like I wonder too sometimes why they
Yeah.
hired me. I had pretty much zero to bring to the table. So yeah.
Okay, so I remember, if I recall right, you left this company around the summer of 2018, and this is kind of where me and you actually kind of connected. And then right there, you started doing a little bit more freelance. This is when your freelance kind of started, and a little bit more is in the summer of 2018. And something that you always made visible and that I always respected about you is you started out doing a lot of work for free, which I think, like in the freelance world, it's very important to kind of know your worth. And when you're starting out, especially to build a portfolio, keeping your prices low. There's some guys who kind of like rank up and they think they're worth more than what they really are. And you started from the ground up, leaving the agency and kind of starting your own career. And can you kind of explain the first kind of gigs you got and how you would reach out starting as a freelancer out of the agency?
Yeah. So basically how that went was I fully intended on working at this place for a really long time. I was happy. It was a very chill and cool and like young vibe there, and I was happy. But
Yeah.
I guess I saw potential to make more money and kind of be my own boss. So what I started doing was, while working there, in the this started early summer of 2018, I started reaching out to, basically I got on SoundCloud and found the manager emails for every DJ that was going to be at any local festival to me. So, and then I just basically shot off I was doing about 20 emails a day to just any opener. I was staying away from headliners because I knew I had no chance, but I wanted to shoot a recap video of their set. I think it was like Lollapalooza, Electric Forest. There was a few others I can't remember, but those were some of the festivals around me. And So I started doing that. I had zero luck. I didn't land anything. But what happened is I actually had a friend say, hey, the Chainsmokers are going to be playing at Notre Dame, which is about 45 minutes from where my house is in Indiana. And they said they're going to be playing there. And, basically there's potential if you reach out to the head, the person who was organizing the content team. He said, if you reach out to him, there's a chance you could get a photo pass. And I was like, no way. The Chainsmokers were my favorite artists at the time. So, I reached out, and it was one day before the concert, and the person got back to me while I was actually sitting at my desk at work and said, yeah, I got a photo pass for you as long as we can, there's no pay, but as long as we can use your photos, I'll give you a photo pass. And I was like, 100% I'm there. So I did that. I went, and I got the photo pass, and I shot, and that was like my first experience where I was like, that sealed the deal. I was like, I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. I have to. Yeah. So that was the first concert that I ever shot. Of course, I went to festivals before and brought my phone and made like phone recaps from the crowd and did that whole thing. But that was the first real one, and the pictures turned out amazing. And I actually I think what gave me inspiration and fueled my fire was some of the, even as small as like Drew from the Chainsmokers, seeing my photos and liking them from it was enough of like, okay, like this is dope that they like it. And like this, I was just all it took was just at least a little bit of recognition for me to be like, this is, I'm doing something right. And it was good content. So that kind of gave me fire to keep going. And so yeah, that was the first concert, and that from that moment on was kind of when I started having thoughts about, all right, how do I monetize this and work my way out of this job?
For sure. So like having that being your first gig, was that very intimidating for you going into, especially that size of a gig? Was it intimidating for you, and how did you get over that fear?
I think, and I'll say this time and time again, I think I wouldn't be where I was if I knew. I was kind of in my own world. I had no clue what it took to sustain myself financially doing this. I had no clue what it took skill-wise to deliver content. Because I learned everything I know from YouTube. I didn't learn a single thing from college or anything like that. I learned it from YouTube, and then what I learned at my that creative agency job. So. I was very much, I guess, just not in the loop with what it took. So I wasn't intimidated just because I think it was two parts. One is I didn't know. I was so oblivious to the situation. And two, I had no skin in the game, really. It wasn't like I was being paid to deliver a certain amount of photos or a certain kind of video. I was just there capturing it for free and having fun. So luckily I wasn't intimidated. I had one of the best nights of my life that night. It was so fun. I put down the camera for a bit and just like danced, had fun. It was a great night. So, but like I said, if knowing now, I think I would have been way more nervous, like knowing what I know now. So I attribute a lot of that to just being oblivious.
Absolutely. Okay, so continuing after on from this gig, we're in the summer of 2018. You get some other gigs popping up, and this is, you're fully out of the agency by this time, and you land a gig. I think your next big one is with Time Flies. Am I correct?
That's a festival. That's correct.
Okay. How did you get this gig with Time Flies, and is it the same way, just kind of reaching out through email, or how was that?
Yeah, I actually got I secured the Time Flies gig while I was still working at the agency.
Okay.
And I think you're right, though. I actually think I had quit before I shot it. But what happened is, Summerfest is another festival that was somewhat within range for me to drive to. It was about 3-4 hours away from me. So I got ahead out because the main response from managers up until this point was, hey, sorry, we already have our positions. We already given out all of our credentials to videographers and photographers, which sometimes I'm sure that was true. Sometimes I'm sure I just wasn't good enough, and that was their easy way of saying no.
Yeah.
But so this time I was like, all right, I'm gonna not let that be an excuse. So I reached out about 2 months before Summerfest. I looked at the lineup, and Time Flies was headlining, and I was like, all right, I know their music, I love it. I'm gonna reach out and just see what's up. So I found their manager's email online somewhere and reached out to him, and basically I offered. I said, hey, at that time, luckily I had the Chainsmokers photos as like credibility. Those were monumental in me getting more gigs, because I mean, I had no business being there, but somehow I had photos of the Chainsmokers, and they turned out so good. So I sent that, and I said, hey, I actually don't really have any video work to show you, but I would love to come shoot photo and video of this show. And the manager got back to me right away and said, hey, I love it. Absolutely. And of course, this was all for free. I offered my services free, and I made that clear in the email. He said, hey, I love it. Absolutely. It's a little far out, so let's just reconnect in another month or a month and a half. And I was like, all right. I thought that was the end of it. I was like, there is no way that he's going to remember me, reach out again. But sure enough, about a month later, I get an email, and he says, hey, we're getting closer, so let's start talking logistics. Let's start talking, getting you your pass and just all that stuff. And I was like, wow, this is happening. So yeah. So then it happened. I went and spent the whole day with them, and I brought 2 friends along, and we killed it. We made a great video, and that was like my first real concert recap, and they were super happy with it. They posted it. It got a lot of love, and I was like, wow, this is it. I just kept proving to myself I can do it, basically, is how that went. And the cool thing about that gig, and we can get into this later if you want or whatever, but Luke, their manager, and Cal and Rez, the 2 guys in Time Flies, actually are some of my best friends to this day, and are one of the main reasons I've been able to progress, grow, and work with the people I have. I talk to Luke and Cal almost on a daily basis now. Luke helps me all the time with just any questions I have, or getting more gigs, or putting me in the right place at the right time. And so it's just crazy how that one gig has turned into such a crazy good relationship, and has been so huge in my, I guess, quote unquote, success or progress towards success.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, continuing on from Time Flies, you also landed a couple of tour gigs. These were your first ever tours, which, as a drummer myself, touring is very, very different from the average Midwest life. So you landed a gig with Somo, who's a worldwide artist, and then the Struts. Can you explain these gigs and kind of what they meant to you?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like I said, that's kind of why I brought up Time Flies and their management, and just how the relationship we had, because their manager was able to link me with Somo's manager, because Somo needed someone to come out for a tour, and I guess somehow my name got thrown out there. So yeah, after the Time Flies gig, I got to go on my first ever tour, which was huge. It was only a week, which was perfect for me at the time.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah.
But yeah, no, that was my first tour, and like I said, as these events happened, it just solidified it more that like I can do this, and it was proving to myself that I can do this. So I did the tour. It was great, and then I ended up doing a music video for him shortly after, which was my first ever music video. Was a full experience, and then shortly after that, through the same, I guess, network of managers, I got thrown out there to do a tour in Europe with the Struts. This was a month long, and obviously being a 19-year-old kid going to, or I guess I was 20. I don't know if I was 19. I was 19 or 20 at the time, and just being that young, going to Europe for a month, and I was getting paid to just film concerts every day, was obviously just an amazing experience. And like I said, just solidified it more and made me believe in myself even more.
For sure. And then right around this time, you were kind of bouncing around the idea to move to LA, which I feel like was a very big stepping stone towards further success for your career. and this was after these tours. Can you kind of explain what was going on through your mind to move through LA and kind of who influenced you to go that direction?
Yeah. I mean, as a content creator, everyone kind of dreams, or for the most part, everyone dreams of living in LA. So that was my dream. Luckily, I had been to LA quite a few times for work in the past, and I just fell in love with it. And so, yeah, basically, I had, like I said, a lot of it stems back to Luke, Time Flies manager, because he was constantly like telling me, I see potential in you. You can do this. Like, you got to get out to LA because it'll just be a rocket ship from there. Like, you just got to get out there. So, that was kind of, I just had that in my ear, and I was like, I got to do it. So what I did basically was, I failed twice. Well, I didn't fail twice. I failed once. I tried to move to LA, in October of, I believe it was 2018.
Okay.
Yeah. Tried to move out here and stay with a friend. It just didn't work out. I was not making like any money. I just wasn't making any money. I had a bad situation. So I ended up coming back after a week, and then I waited for about another year to the summer of 2019. And by that time I had developed a relationship with a friend out here who runs a podcast. So long story short, I came out and I had enough money to pay rent for a month. So I paid rent at his place for a month, and that's kind of when that was a crucial month for me. I made a ton of really crucial relationships that led to being paid consistently, and allowed me to basically financially have the means to move to LA finally. And so I came home after that month of staying in LA, and I was like, all right, I think I can do it.
For sure. And then when you went out there by yourself, where did you move, and kind of like what was the struggle and sacrifice going into it? It had to have been extremely intimidating kind of moving out there on your own. Where did you move, and what was the struggle kind of going into that?
So I came out here with my friend, and I would say that the main struggles from even before we drove out was obviously money was the first thing. It was my first apartment. I had no clue what I was doing, and I wasn't making a ton of money at the time. And obviously I'm still not making a ton of money, but at the time it wasn't making like almost not enough to even afford the apartment. So I would say that was the biggest struggle. And two was just like fear, like I was so scared of living 20 years at my parents' house and having so much comfort and like safety. And I was just scared of leaving. So, but yeah, once we actually drove across America, made it to LA, we moved to a very small apartment, 2-bedroom apartment in Koreatown. And that, I think, if anyone who lives in LA, you would pretty much know that proves my I guess, I don't know what the right word is, but my lack of understanding of what, I guess, where to live in LA. Koreatown can be very affordable, but it's on, close to downtown, and just isn't, depending on where you're at, and we were in a pretty bad area, it just, wasn't very safe, or just not a good area at all, especially for young kids who like don't know what they're doing. I felt not at home at all. So that was the biggest struggle once we moved here, was just, on top of not being near family anymore and struggling to make ends meet, was just this, you never feeling that safe and never feeling comfortable and just like at home. So that was the biggest struggle. Once we moved here, luckily we were able to move out of there, and I live in a different part of LA now, and it's been great, but I haven't even been here a year yet. So I feel like I'm still pretty new to LA and that whole experience.
For sure. Your first initial week or month, did you have any connections? I know you had the connections with the previous gigs you had, but did you have like work that you knew was going to be ready for you, or did you just kind of move out there and expecting the work to show up as you progressed?
Yeah, I had a crucial, I guess, factor in me moving here too, was that I had I was on a kind of monthly I was working with a clothing company on a monthly basis, and I knew that that was going to be there. That was like a concrete thing where I was being paid enough to at least pay rent. So I was like, okay, that's enough if I don't get
Yeah.
anything else. But yeah, besides that, like I had a few gigs that I knew were going to happen right away, which was nice. But like after the first month, I didn't have anything booked out. But man, I don't know. I was so blessed, and just things came at me so quickly. And before I knew it, I had too much work to handle. I was pulling all nighters
Wow.
almost like not every night, but I was pulling an insane amount of all nighters. I was just overwhelmed. And uh, I've definitely toned it back now because that's not sustainable. But at the time, I was just grateful to even be having, being paid and having money and like having work to do. That was like
Absolutely.
my number one, survival was just my number one priority once I moved out here. So yeah.
For sure. So moving along, besides the previous gigs that you were working on and those connections you've had, building up, who were some of your first connections that you kind of met through LA, and who kind of introduced you to the city, working with them a little bit more besides the clothing company that you were working for?
Um, it really just happened. I don't think it was one particular person or situation. It was like you hear the saying all the time of just like, you do one thing and then that will lead you to meet someone else who will lead you to meet someone else. And that's kind of how it happened. I just, before I moved to LA, I had worked so hard at networking. And even if it was just getting someone's phone number, and we have, we talk for 15 minutes before and I get their phone number when we leave. And that was our relationship. That was all I cared about, really, was just having a network. So luckily that came in very handy. And once I moved out to LA, and those people who I had connected with were aware I was now a resident in LA, they started sending me work. And then it just literally, all that happened, I'm telling you, it's so crazy, is I would just be at one place and someone else would be there, and I would develop a relationship with them, and then work would come from that. And then I would be with that person, and another person would be there that I would develop a relationship with, and that would lead to more work. And I think it's very simple. All I did was constantly just try to deliver value and never ask anyone for anything. I just
Yeah.
would meet someone and say, this is what I do. I would love to work with you. I'm not even asking for money. I just want to deliver value to you. And I think that took me a long way.
For sure. Okay, so continuing on with the gigs in LA, you made some pretty big connections that are some breaking points. Can you kind of explain who are some artists that you were able to work with, and kind of the trail of people?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the first things that happened when I moved to LA is I got contacted. This was once again a situation of just a friend of a friend kind of thing. Got contacted to start editing remotely for a tour for these DJs, and their name is Noted. And so I was familiar with their music at the time. Actually, I love their music, and so I was like, yeah, of course I'll do this, and of course I want to make money. So I did this, and it was funny because this one gig actually has led to, I think, some of the most prosperous things in my life. And so anyway, I started editing this tour. They were on tour with Zed, and so their videographer would film every night and then just upload to Dropbox. And I was editing, just busting out these recaps, and I was having so much fun. I was working so hard. This is kind of when the all-nighters started, because it was, they had shows every day. So I was just trying to bust out recap after recap. And then they came to LA to play a show, and I was like, hey, I'll come out and shoot this for free. Once again, just trying to deliver value, and show thanks for, giving me so much work.
Yeah.
And so I go out, and it was funny because the two kids and then their videographer are all in the age range of like 20 to 21.
Oh, wow.
So that's my age, and we kind of hit it off, and we became friends. And from that, they're actually like three of my best friends to this day still. And so I shot the show, helped make the recap, and then basically they were continuing their tour a little later in Europe with Zed. And so since we had become friends and they liked the work I was doing, they invited me out. to Europe to go on tour with them instead. And so um, that was basically the next gig I did, which was huge. And there, I just, I got to meet more people, and that was amazing. So yeah, that was one of the first big gigs. And then from there, I got to go do a video with Yes Theory, which was one of my favorite things to do. I love Yes Theory, and so working with them was great. Um, I basically shot a bunch of DJs at like the Palladium here in Hollywood, and that was super cool. I loved doing that. And then so basically I was able to work with a ton of artists and do a lot of touring and kind of do stuff in the music world. But I think the most pivotal moment for me since I've moved here was when I went to Poland and was able to document this trip that was basically created by Lewis Howes, and then he recruited people like Jesse Itzler, Mike Posner, Aubrey Marcus, just to name a few. And basically, those are all just amazing leaders, businessmen, former athletes. Steve Weatherford was on the trip. He's a former Super Bowl champion. So it was amazing to go on this trip and document it. And obviously, Wim Hof himself is a complete legend and expert in his space. So I was able to go document this trip in early 2020. And as far as gigs go, that was the coolest thing I've ever done. And I think from that moment, once again, just proved to myself that I can do more than I thought originally. And so, that I didn't name every single person, but that's basically kind of that touches on who I worked with when I moved out here. And I think, we can get into this too if you want once later, but the Wim Hof trip was monumental, just even for personally inside me.
I'm sure
grew so much, and that's really changed my life. So and then after that, kind of, the pandemic happened, and that's definitely shut down a lot of my plans. But so that was the last big travel gig that I did.
Such an amazing journey, man. It's really inspiring watching the whole trail happen too, firsthand.
Thank you, dude. I appreciate it. It's been, I know it's just crazy that we met so early too, when I had no clue what I was doing.
Yeah, that's true. I want to kind of get your advice to make it as a freelancer. You already shared the networking things with reaching out. I don't know your tactics, but if there's any more tactics that you would like to share of overcoming the fear of being a freelancer or the intimidation.
I think the biggest thing is always delivering value. That's why I did so much free work in the beginning. And I love at the beginning when you talked about knowing your worth, because, free work is amazing. And it's, in my opinion, as a creator, the best way to network. But it can be the one, caution I would bring up is that it can be hard to transition from doing free work for someone and then, 5 gigs later say, all right, I'm ready to get paid now. And they're like, well,
for sure.
What? We haven't been paying. You know what I mean? So it's kind of can be hard. And that's been my biggest focus the last year, has been transitioning from doing free work to getting what I'm worth. And like I said, delivering value is always the biggest thing. I still do free work to this day. You just have to assess the opportunity, and an experience or the chance to work with someone or a brand can be worth more than charging $1,000 for a video. That can be worth more as an investment. But that's my biggest piece of advice. And then I'd say number 2 is just making sure you have the right intentions. There's so many, everyone can buy a camera and take a good photo these days. And there's so many people, and I fell victim to this for a little bit as well, but just people creating content for the wrong reasons. If you're creating content just to, feel good whenever you post it and feel validated by other people, if that's the only reason, then I don't think that'll last very long. That's not sustainable. Once the going gets tough and, things change, you're going to end up quitting. So I think that's the biggest thing as well. And I had to definitely do a little reality check and make some adjustments in my own life over the past year. But now I feel fully focused on what my intention is. And yeah, man, I just love telling stories. And I think that if that's your passion and you love what you do, you'll be able to be successful at it, whether it's sooner or later.
For sure. There's another thing I want to point out. There's a thing called creator burnout that a lot of creators face. And I'm sure you face it too. Do you know any ways of kind of rejecting and kind of moving away from creator burnout to continue enjoying what you're doing, but also creating that norm? Because if you do too much, you're going to burn yourself out. So what have you done around that?
Man, I am by far not an expert in this because I go through burnout all the time.
I'm sure.
But, I guess I actually just landed in LA, 2 days ago from a month-long trip at home. And that to me was like the biggest reset. It's so tough because starting out, you have to grind, the all-nighters. And that's what made me able to, I guess, grow so quickly and develop relationships and do so much so quickly. But at the same time, I left, basically 2019 was the year of grinding for me. And I ended 2019 totally exhausted and just like, feeling good about what I had done, but also at the same time, like, man, I got to figure out how to balance this. Cause, especially when I first moved to LA, I went through almost a depression because of how burnt out I was. And, I think the one way that I found to fight it is balance. And it doesn't necessarily mean, I don't think it even means like taking off an equal amount of time as you work. It's not necessarily that. It's just balance to me is kind of like making it work for you. Some people can work 12 hours a day and not get burnt out. And that's fine. But you just have to really assess yourself often and notice the signs of when it's coming. I think it's really, I guess, a very individual kind of situation.
Absolutely. Looking back on your work, is there anything that you regret that you have done or haven't done being a creator that you would want to share with other creators out there?
I'm a firm believer in not having any regrets because I think that where I'm at, I wouldn't be here if it weren't for the things I regret doing or not doing. Maybe there's certain situations. I can honestly say, though, there's nothing I regret not doing, if that makes sense. I didn't ever like pass up an opportunity or not do something. I always found a way to make it work. But, of course, there's different things I wish I approached differently now, but you have to appreciate where you were at that time in life. And I think that's exactly what I'm able to do. I'm able to say, all right, at that time, I had no clue about this thing. So it makes sense why I made that decision. But, like I said, I think if there's anyone who's worried about regret, it's, you're going to, and this is obviously a popular quote, but you're going to regret, at the end of your life, you're going to regret what you didn't do way more than what you did do, even if that situation turned out poorly or something like that, So I've always tried to stick by that motto. Mm-hmm. And if I'm on the fence, I just do it. As far as like, a gig, maybe if it's like, I think a perfect example is the Time Flies gig. I would have regretted not doing that because, I had to drive so far, we spent so much money just getting there, buying food, paying for gas, all of this stuff. And I lost money on that gig. And I could have easily said, you know what, I'm going to lose money. I'm not going to do it. And but instead I said, you know what, I don't want to have any regrets. I have an opportunity. I'm going to take it. And I think that's kind of the motto I try to live by.
Absolutely. Well, Dalton, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. Everything you shared was very insightful, and your journey from starting from Indiana, moving to Hollywood.
Thank you for having me on. It was great talking to you, and I hope that I was able to at least inspire one person.
Hey, thank you for listening to this episode of Starting Small. If you would, leave a review on whatever platform you're listening on. Also, follow Starting Small Pod on social platforms to keep up to date on future guests.